I'm going to show you how to make this cosmetic bag or a wash bag. It's really easy to make, and it's great because it uses up scraps of fabric, so you only need a small amount of fabric. Love the decorations on it, the ribbon, the bows and the buttons, and it's fully lined as well. And of course you can adapt it to different sizes if you like, so you can do a much smaller one or even an intermediate one. So this is what you need, this is how you're going to make it. This is the lining of my fabric, so I've got two pieces of fabric exactly the same, and they measure 11 inches across by 9 inches deep. For the front of my bag, I've got two pieces of fabric that measure 11 inches across by 4.5 inches deep, two pieces that measure 11 inches across by 2 inches deep, and then a piece of calico which goes into the centre, which measures again 11 inches across by 4.5 inches deep. My strips of fabric which are going to decorate the centrepiece they're quite random, around about 2 inches wide, and lots of different strips of coordinating colours or mixed match colours, it really doesn't matter. Mine all match quite nicely, I think, and I'm going to apply those at random sections across the front of the calico, because eventually that's one side that I've done already. This is the way that I want the bag to look on both sides, so that's my aim. I've also got a nylon zip which is 13 inches in length, which I know is too big for the bag, but I find it easier to cut a zip down rather than try and extend it to fit into the width of the bag. I've got a matching button and then just some lace and some ribbon to decorate. So the first thing I'm going to do is to apply the strips to the calico. So I put my first strip face upwards to the edge of the calico and just sew that to secure it. Oops. Just so it covers the edge of the calico. Your stitches don't have to be perfect or any particular length, and it doesn't matter if you can't sew straight. So that's my first strip. The second one is going to go face down, but I want to avoid that stitch line so you don't see it when I turn this over. So take my fabric, lay it face down and at an angle like so. Then back under the machine and sew down the edge. And it doesn't matter your seam allowance, and it doesn't matter if your stitches don't sit straight. Then fold that over. Now normally I take this to the iron on every single strip and I would press it. But I'm just going to finger crease that for now so you get the idea. The next piece goes face down, avoiding that edge, and at another angle, and so. And I'm going to carry on like this until I've covered the whole of that strip of calico. Now I know this fabric's too large, I'm going to cut that down later. And my colours are all kind of the same tones, the pinks and teals, but you could choose black and white, navy and lime green, a whole rainbow of different bright colours. Come on. Or just keep it in the same shades, so the same shades of pink or the same shades of blue. That's up to you. Again, face down, at an angle, and so. It's a nice bag to make for a beginner to do as well, because it's quite quick, so you don't get impatient while you're making it up. And it looks really professional when it's finished, but it's very easy to make. And again, normally I'd press. I have a steam generator iron which I can leave on all the time normally. So in between each stitch line I would normally take that to the iron and give it a press. Press that open, and one or two more should just about do it. One more, just to cover the end of that strip. So. Okay, I'll just fold that back. shall press that shortly. The only thing I'm going to do now is to sew over the ends of my calico so I know that the end pieces are attached. And the same with the other side. Then if you have your rotary cutter to hand, this would be the easiest way to make a straight line. But just for now I'm going to cut up to the calico line with my scissors and trim away all of the excess fabric. When you're cutting your strips, you'll need those to be slightly longer than the width of your calico because they're at an angle, so diagonally they're longer. But you can trim them back quite easily, and this again isn't going to be seen, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But you can see how that's starting to grow. So the next thing I'm going to do is take my base section and lay that face downwards on top of my patchwork section, and sew across the bottom with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just make sure that's straight. And again, normally I'd press that open at this point. And then just the same way I'm going to sew on the top section face down. This is the bit where the zip's going to go. All I'm going to do at the moment is to make sure that this marries up with the other side of my bag. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's nice to be close. And again, normally now I'd take that over to the iron and press it, but I'll do that in just a second. So there's my front and my back of my bag that match. I'm going to take one side of my bag, it doesn't matter which one. I've also cut a piece of ribbon to about 8 inches long, and I've sewn on top of that a piece of lace. If I fold that in half, that's going to be the handle for my wrist, and then I'll need to pop that against the seam of my bag to one side, it doesn't matter which side. And I'm going to pin that there, facing inwards, and then just put a few stitches over the top just to hold that in place. So that's just like a tacking stitch to hold it there, so I'm not sewing over the top of my pin. So when the bag's sewn together, the handle comes to the outside and it's trapped in the seam, which keeps it nice and neat. The other thing that I'm going to do is to decorate the front of the bag before I put the whole thing together. So I'm going to make a little faux bow with another piece of lace and ribbon, which is about the same length, about 8 inches in length. And I'm going to fold both of those pieces in half to the middle. That'll make my bow. And place that on the opposite side of the seam to my handle. And I'm just going to put a few stitches to secure that in the centre. Then over the top of that I'll do the tails to my bow, if you like. So I'm going to take another piece of ribbon. It's about 8 inches long again, just until it looks okay, and fold that in half. Fold the ribbon in half and snip it towards the centre to make the V shape, and that helps to stop the ribbon from fraying. And I think I'll have a piece of lace as well, to around about the same length, maybe a little longer. And again, that's just going to be folded in half, and this time I'm just going to cut it at an angle because I think it would look better. And that can go behind. So again, I'm going to lay the piece of lace on top of my bow, and then the ribbon on top of that, and open that up just a little bit. And then just put a few stitches with the machine in the centre to hold all of those together. And I'm not too worried about those stitches not being very pretty, because I'm going to cover those with a button. And notice I'm avoiding the seams because I've yet to sew the bag together and I don't want to trap the ribbon in between the seams. So I'll hand sew this one on from the back straight through and just go into the other hole and go over that a few times till it's secure. Oh, come on. That's it. Double up your thread normally because you can sew twice as quick. But it looks like a bow, and all my the messy stitching is hidden behind the button. That's it. That'll do for now. You go over that a few more times to make it nice and secure. And you can see the back of my bag is really messy, but that's going to be inside the seam, so nobody's going to know. So just knot off the rest of my thread, like so. Oops, come in. Okay, I'll take back a few of those threads just so they don't feel lumpy through my bag. So that's going to be the front of my bag. If you wanted to, you could put some more lace, maybe across the seams, top and bottom. It depends how fussy you like the bag to look, but I think that's quite well dressed as it is. So I'm going to fold the handle back in again, and now we're going to pop the zip on. So, taking the front of the bag and keeping it face up, and the zip face down, as in the slider is facing down, I'm going to pop that onto the edge of my fabric like so. And then my lining fabric I'm going to attach at the same time. So take one of the pieces of lining fabric and line that up to the top, so I've got a zip sandwich. Keeping the edges all straight together, I'm going to pop a few pins across here, and then just with a piece of needle, a thread with a needle, I'm going to put a basting stitch all the way along, because it's easier to sew around tacking stitches than it is to sew around pins. That can tend to distort your stitch line, and on a zip we want them particularly straight. So that's my first side of my zip sandwich, like so. And I'll just tie a knot in my needle and thread. And it doesn't matter, doesn't matter what colour thread you're going to use here, you're going to unpick this afterwards and put just a running stitch, so it doesn't matter about the stitch length or anything like that, or whether you're sewing in a straight line. This is purely a tacking or a basting stitch, depending on which side of the pond you're watching, just to hold those pieces in place. So, it's a very quick bag. Now if you're using a fabric that frays quite a lot, there's no reason why you couldn't do a little zigzag stitch across the top of the fraying edge on your machine. You don't need to, I don't think, for a cosmetics bag. And if you wanted to add a real spot of luxury, then apply some fusible wadding to the lining side and make it feel nicely padded. But I think for a beginner this is going to be really special. Okay, so there's my tacking stitches, or my basting stitches. Then I'll need to put my zipper foot onto my sewing machine. And this is a foot that takes the needle of the machine over to one side, so I can sew close to the teeth of the zip without sewing over the top of the teeth, which can again distort your stitches. So all the way down the edge, you can actually feel where the teeth of the zip are, if that helps. You could use that as a guide against the side of your zipper foot. And this is where I think it helps having a zip that's a little bit longer than the bag, because I'm not trying to sew around the slider. The slider's out of the way at the moment. Machine back. Then when I open this up, there's my zip trapped in between the front and the lining. I've got quite a lot of the ribbon of the tape of the zip showing, and I like that because I like to see the zip because it matches. And then normally I would press. But for now, I'm going to sew on the other side. So again, take the matching side of your bag. So that needs to sit on the opposite side like so. Fold it back towards you. So the edges of the zip are lined up with the edge of the bag. And then flip that over. So there's my lining. That's how I want my lining to sit. Flip that over so the two right sides are right side together, are facing together. Make sure that the ends of your fabric match, and then do just the same with the other side of the zip. So make sure all three layers of fabric are matching together. Put a little row of pins all the way down. Then you can use your basting stitch and then go over that again with your sewing machine. So there's the second side of my lining sewn together with my zip and with the outer layer. So when I open these up, that's the inside of my bag, and that is the outside of my bag. Now at this point, if you haven't sewn straight down here, you can always go back and sew over it again if you wanted to, if you needed to. Don't worry about everything not being exactly the same size at the moment, because we're about to sew the whole thing together, and then it'll tie together very well. What I need to do is to just pull that zipper, the slider back, because I'm going to sew the seam across here now, so I'm just going to pull it back slightly, and then fold this over and then pin. So I'm folding the right sides of the bag together, of the outside, and then do the same on the lining and fold those two. So I've got two sides of the right side of my bag and the two sides of the lining of my bag all together. Now I'm going to start sewing at the zip, and I'm going to fold the zip inwards. And that's the seam that I'm going to see on the outside of my bag, so that's the seam that I want to pin to make sure that matches up. And then what I'll do is to sew all the way around the bag and then leave a gap at the bottom so that I can turn it the right way out. So the right side is the most important side, so this is the one I'm matching up first. I push the zip in. Doesn't really matter whether you push it in or out, but as long as they're both in the same direction. And pin here. And keep pinning all the way around. Now again, as I'm pinning, I've started to notice that one side of my fabric is slightly not square to the other. That doesn't matter as long as I sew that square, because sometimes your fabric moves a little bit and it grows or shrinks a little bit as you're sewing. Only a little bit, but it can happen. And then again I'm going to carry on around the other side. But just before I complete the sewing, I need to undo the zip, else I won't be able to turn the bag the right way around. So just find the slider. I wanted to pin it first to make sure that my seams are straight. And then, where are you? I can unzip that slider. It doesn't have to be all the way, just so I can turn it the right way around. Then carry on pinning. And then I'm going to sew all the way around. Now then, I've got to make sure that that handle is tucked inwards, otherwise I won't be able to see it. And again, start at that zip, at the seam, where the two sides meet. Put the needle down and start to sew over the zip. Now it doesn't matter that you're sewing over a nylon zip, just take it steady. As you go over pins, I know some people will say it's completely wrong to sew over pins, but I've never actually broken a needle, but if you prefer to take them out as you go, then that's up to you, that's fine. Straight across the bottom of my bag and into the corner. Leave the needle down there while I pivot around and straight back down the other side. That's the thicker piece of fabric where the calico is. Make sure my zip's lined up. Just take it easy again over the teeth of the zip, or the coil of the zip as it's called. Let's turn that the same way. And down to the final sides. And with the lining section that I'm going across now, I need to leave a gap across the bottom. So I'll sew into the corner, pivot it around, sew a few inches, and then just back tack to secure the stitches. Then lift it up, move it across, pop your foot down, back tack again, because there'll be a little bit of a strain on that opening when you turn it, and I don't want it to rip. And then turn around and back down the same side that you started with. Now at this point I need to make sure all of my pins are out. So I don't want to turn the bag inside out with the pins in, and I can snip off the extra length of the zip. Careful on the very ends of the zip because there is a metal piece there. But before I turn this the right side out, I want to square off the base. So what I'm going to do is to pull either side at the base into the point, and then you can feel where those seams match up. So I'm forming a triangle with the seams matching on either side. And I can pop a pin in there. And then I need to measure about 1.5 inches down here and then sew all the way across. So I'm going to take my ruler in a second, but I need to measure from here to about 1.5 inches and then draw a straight line across here. And that's the line that I'm going to sew at. So I'll just go and get my ruler and make sure that that's square. I should be back in a second. There you go, forgot my ruler. So from the point, 1.5 inches, that was a good guess, and then my line is drawn straight across there, and that's the line that I'm going to sew. And I need to do this on all 4 corners, so go forwards and back tack so the stitches don't come undone, and then sew straight across that line and back tack again. Take your pin out, and I'm going to cut the corner off so that there's not too much bulk on the right side of my corner. Then do exactly the same on the other side. So pull that seam out, feel where the seams match. You'll know when they're lining up. You can actually feel that. Pop a pin in. Measure your 1.5 inches from the corner, which is here, and then make sure that's a straight line. You can normally gauge whether it's a straight line or not, but measure if you're not too sure, because that does need to be a perfect triangle. And then sew across again, forward, back tack, sew across and back tack. Take your pin out, snip your thread, cut the corner. Do the same with the lining. So again, join those 2 seams together. Normally you'd pin, but I'm just going to go for it. So that's 1.5 inches, just the same on the front of the bag. Snip off your excess. And then do the same with the other side. So join those 2 seams together, pin it and measure it to be perfectly accurate, and then sew across the 1.5 inch mark. And then we're nearly done. Snip, snip across the fabric. The last thing to do is to turn the bag inside out, and then we'll press it. So this, I know it's nearly finished. This is where it was useful to have the zip undone. The zip was undone, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to turn it the right way out. Shush! So pull it all the way through like that. You can see my bag, and it's got the square base, so it's going to sit very nicely. One final thing to do before I turn it entirely the right way out is to sew over this closure. So there's my bag base, there's the opening. Now if you wanted to do that by hand and do a very careful self-coloured ladder stitch, that would be very nice. But for now I'm just going to sew over that opening by machine. I've folded in the two raw ends so they're the same length as the hem, and I'm just going to go straight across the bottom. And I think you'll find if you buy a cosmetic bag or a makeup bag, have a look at the inside of the lining, and it's very rarely that somebody's actually taken the time and the trouble to hand sew that opening closed, because to be honest, it's not very often you're going to turn your makeup bag inside out to check the stitching. Then you're going to push the lining inside the bag, push out the seams, push out the corners where the zip goes right into the corner like so, and on the other side, and then we're done. Try and give that a press without squashing it flat. So if you've got what would I've done? If you've got a ham, then you could use that. I've just caught that ribbon in the, that wasn't being careful enough, I just caught it in the stitching, but you'd never know, particularly when I trim that back again. That's fine. But you know, if I had have made a mess of that, I can simply unpick the seam and do it all over again. But a little bit of pressing, and full of cosmetics and makeup or sweets or presents, or even a little lingerie bag. I think that would make a lovely little nightdress case. And we're all done. Now I've got a few different colours to show you and different sizes. This was just using some Tilda charm packs for the stripes. You can see it's smaller, you can make these in any size you like, and that one's plain on the reverse side. And then finally, I went even smaller with this one. I didn't put the contrasting fabric on the bottom, I just used the stripes that went all the way down. It's made in just the same way, so I've got the contrast lining on the inside, and that one's got the stripes on both sides. So you could go from a small little makeup bag to a cosmetic bag to a wash bag, and if you went even bigger, you could even make that into a clutch bag to go out in the evening time. What do you reckon, Alfie?